guys, and welcome back to the channel. So the time has finally come to speak about the Titan Crystal. Now this might not be an issue immediately for everybody, but I do know for a fact that the amount of players that this is bothering is increasing, as well as, you know, my own personal conversations from the streams where people who are not spending much at all, or in general, even free-to-play players are kind of increasingly seeing this problem, especially if they are still active. And that is effectively the excitement around the Titan crystals, and also the kind of pattern where basically it doesn't make sense to open these crystals at any given point, and you just kind of hoard them until they roll over, and then you open a bunch, and then you start hoarding again. And that is happening more and more, and I also do think it has negative repercussions in the game at large, because this is meant to be the premium, the most exciting crystal, but it isn't. The Titan crystal shards are not that exciting to get anymore, and then significantly devalued as a chase reward, because obviously Kabam chose to introduce Titan crystal, which, by the way, I was quite a bit against from the very beginning, because when we had a featured hero crystal system, we could choose. We had agency how we spend our shards, whether we go for basics, whether we go for features, and try to hunt for the new champions. Now with obviously the Titan crystals, that has been taken away from us. We earn 7-star crystal shards, which by the virtue of Titan crystal existing also kind of have devalued in meaning. And then we have the Titan crystal shards, which obviously Kabam initially monetized very successfully, which is the entire reason why Titan crystal exists. But initially it still worked somewhat well. And the reason why it did is because it was scarce, because you couldn't just auto-snipe all the champions, because you couldn't hoard like 20, 30 Titan crystals and then basically have like somewhat of a guaranteed or like very likely chance to acquire like many, if not all, the champions that you are after. But as the time goes on, obviously Kabam had to increase the Titan crystal shards in the circulation, because again, if Kabam never increased the rewards, that would cause issues in the game economy in itself, and, you know, player-based dissatisfaction. But now it generally kind of feels like the Titan crystal is moving very, very slowly, which is going to be the second point that I talk about. And at this point, you're just kind of always waiting for it to roll over. And again, I completely get it that there are like mid-tier players, newer players who do not have these champions, and Titan shards are still very, very exciting to them. But there is, again, increasingly large amount of player base. Again, not even who whales, not even who spends much, but just plays the game, collects the shards, and they still effectively get the champions that they want, stop and start hoarding for the next one, which, in my opinion, again, is kind of a bad behavior for the game, because it makes it less interesting, it makes it less dull, it makes some of the top rewards seem more flat, and there is less excitement, less dopamine to hit when you're constantly opening these Titan crystals and you're kind of like chasing these shards. And one aspect of that obviously has been the Kabam's reliance on extra methods how to release the champions. And I think for most part that is fine. I do think that is kind of like a cool aspect, differentiated champion acquisition methods. But again, it is a zero-sum game, basically, where if Kabam is releasing champions, either we're going to be getting them from there or the Titan crystals, but since they're not coming from the Titan crystals, the Titan crystal itself is less kind of like a relevant resource in the game. And the biggest kind of like hit factor, I think, here has been the increase to the 3-month period. I think that kind of like drastically exacerbated the problem, because the champions are rotating so much slower now that players have so much more time to accumulate these shards, where again they can effectively just wait for the Titan to roll over, open as many crystals as, you know, they have, and in many cases they're going to get every champion that they're looking for, or most of the champions that they're looking for. And without like trying to use myself as like a big example here, but, you know, that has been happening for like 3 or 4 cycles now, where you're just sitting on your Titan shards. And like in this case, I'm going to be waiting 72 days, because there's nothing that I particularly want from these crystals. That rollover time is so great. And in this case, again, it felt so much worse, because there are a handful of champions that are genuinely just not necessarily worth chasing, or do not give you any added extra value. For instance, you know, I don't I want Dracula, but I'm not going to chase Dracula. There's no reason for me to open a crystal, which is going to likely result in me pulling something that I'm not after, or a maxing champion for Dracula. I don't think he's kind of good enough. I did that for Nico, and I kept opening my crystal shards until I got Nico, basically. But then after that point, the champion would have to be basically exceptional, right? And I know, again, from conversations in my chat, several different tiers of players, many of them like minimal spending or basically free to play, but just not opening the time crystals anymore. And always wait for the rollover. And I personally think Kabam should do something like that. I think it was objectively a very big mistake when Kabam moved to the 3-month period. Because again, it absolutely kind of like slowed the game down to a crawl in a sense with new champions that are coming in our regular rotations. And as a great example, we can take a look at like Okoye, for instance. Okoye was one of the first champions released in 2025. Right, 173. Like 7 stars, we pick 2025. And can I sort them by release date here or not? Right, that doesn't have to be skill. But either way, Okoye was basically the first or second champion released in 2025. She just now entered the basic crystal. Like literally just now, like in the last rotation, like 3 weeks ago. And that's basically a year that many of these champions wait. Another issue with that time period being so long is that many of the champions kind of go through an entire lifespan within that year. What do I mean by that? If we take a look at, do we have Zola here? We can use Yelena as an example. Because Yelena is in similar boat. Where Yelena obviously gets released and she's this monster defender. And then Kabam releases like 6 mutants in between that absolutely counter her. And by the time she enters the basic pool, she's kind of like a shadow of her defensive prowess, what she once was when she was initially released. It takes us basically like 3 months for most people to get that champion to begin with, even from the Titan Crystal, and it takes like a year for the champion to enter the basic. And majority of that champion's relevance is kind of already done and over. Like Zola is another example of this. By the time Zola enters the basic crystal, or when he even entered the Titan Crystal, he just wasn't half as dangerous defender than he was. And that again makes new champion acquisition kind of feel worse, because you're obviously missing out on that initial excitement from the champion release, initial hype, because you know it's going to be quite a while until you get that champion, and by the time you do get that champion, the champion is, nowhere near as relevant anymore. And what is to blame for that, what kind of like, again, exacerbates the problem, is the fact that it takes about a year for the champion to actually move into the basic crystal. If we were back at like the 2-month cycle, for instance, that just wouldn't be the case, right? Because then, you'd get the chance to get that champion quicker, because it would take maximum of 2 months for that champion to enter the Titan Crystal, where you already had a chance to get it, and it would take like 6 to maximum 8 months for that champion to enter the basic crystal and be more available. So I genuinely do think Kabam has to do something with the Titan cycle and rotation. And one of the big things that we recently saw was Kabam releasing all of these extra champions in the base pool like in one big batch, which first of all I think is a good thing. But the reason that so many of these kind of got accumulated is not. It would have been a lot better if he had a faster moving Titan Crystal, and all of these batches of champions also got included in that Titan, let's say in every rotation, like 2 by 2, and they would have entered all of these crystal pools gradually, I believe. And like counter-fire champions, for instance, we still don't have any way to acquire them, and now we have this new set of champions that's also going to be exclusive. I think somebody did like a count, even after this whole batch of champions got introduced to the basic crystal, we still had like 37 stars that are basically exclusive. because, you know, the Incursions Crystal, the Loyalty Crystal champions are not in the base pool. Then we have Human Torch, Dark Phoenix, we have Red Guardian, and now we have the Heart Fire champions. Now we have the box champions that have just been released. And somebody went out and counted, and even after this like massive champion dump, there's still like so many champions that you just cannot acquire on a regular basis, like the CCP champs, the Starkey, the Massacre, the Spider-Man 2099. Again, and you just can't keep going, where I am trying to get to the point that Time Crystal system is not working well right now. I think it's too slow. I think it is bad for the players. I think it makes the crystal opening experience and champion acquisition worse for the players, less exciting. And this hoarding behavior in itself is lessening kind of like the hype and enjoyment for the game. And I think Kabam should care about that, because it wouldn't be like a massive change for Kabam in terms they can still monetize basically exactly the same way. If anything, I think that could help Kabam to monetize, because, you know, Time Crystal was moving quicker and players couldn't hoard up enough shards to kind of like hit all the champions that they want. Then Kabam would have easier time, you know, selling the Titans and Titan shards to the players, and they would be seen as more valuable resource once again. That, again, might somewhat degrade the quality of the Time Crystal, but it entirely depends how good the buffs and all the extra champions that Kabam would put in there would be. Because, again, like, if Kabam, like, this recent addition of Dracula, Frankencastle, Mr. Knight, and alike, you know, it did nothing but kind of downgrade the overall quality of the Time Crystal anyways, right? So here we are. I hope Kabam has something in the plans for this. I do know that Yusafa brought this up previously from the Max Sig perspective, which at that time I didn't think is, you know, specifically relevant to me, but it has since become relevant to me, because, you know, we do need to max out like 30 champions for prestige, so I have been working actively to try and get as many of these champions to Sig 200 as well. And now when I looked at the Titan Crystal, like half the champions that are in there, I do have Max Sig. I'm still not entirely sure what benefit do I get from getting a Max Sig from the Titan Crystal. And, you know, it still hasn't come into the game. And it overall just creates this reluctance for people to open. And again, I know for a fact that I'm not alone. I know that there are like free-to-play players with several 100,000 Titan shards saved up. I know people who completely skipped this entire thing and are waiting for the crystal to roll over. And then if you think about that, if somebody skips a Titan crystal, they're basically hoarding shards for half a year. That is not good. Kabam specifically have said themselves in the past that, you know, they do not encourage people hoarding shards, and they do not think that it is good. And I think this right now clearly proves that we do have a problem with the champion rotations, with this premium crystal system, and I would love for Kabam to address it. Again, my suggestion would be go back to 2 months instead of 3. If you do need to fill up these spots, then again, you can just add in the buff champions, because Kabam is constantly buffing new champions. We have all of these exclusive champions that Kabam sold in events or were like special trophy prizes, like the Yondus, the Super Scrolls, the Human Torches, the Red Guardians, and I think a ton of people would love to see those champions in Titan Crystals as well. That would definitely energize the player base to kind of like go and chase them rather than constantly hoard them. And again, if it would be 2 months, you wouldn't have too much time to hoard these shards. You would have less time than you have now, and you couldn't accumulate hundreds of thousands of Titan Crystal shards for every Titan rollover. But let me know what you guys think. I'm gonna catch you guys soon. Bye bye. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about